In 1987, a 21-year-old appeared on the Oprah Winfrey Show. He was charming, polished. He talked about ambition, hard work, and the American dream. The audience loved him. His name was Barry Minkow, and at that exact moment, he was running one of the largest financial frauds in American history. His company, ZZZZ Best, was worth $300 million on paper. Wall Street called him a genius. Banks competed to lend him money. The mayor of Los Angeles declared a Barry Minkow Day. There was just one problem. The entire thing, the contracts, the revenue, the business, was a lie. Every single dollar of it, built from nothing by a teenager who started stealing at 16 and didn't stop until the FBI showed up at his door. This is the story of Barry Minkow, and it gets stranger the further you go. Barry Minkow was born in 1966 in the San Fernando Valley, California. By most accounts, he was an ordinary kid, except for one thing. He wanted to be rich. Not someday rich, now rich, teenager rich. In 1982, at the age of 16, he started a carpet cleaning company out of his parents' garage. He called it ZZZZ Best. The name was designed to appear last in the yellow pages, Z being the final letter of the alphabet, so anyone flipping to the back of the directory would find him first. That's the kind of thinking Barry Minkow had at 16. The problem was the company was losing money almost immediately. Carpet cleaning is a low-margin, labor-intensive business. Barry needed cash to keep the lights on, to pay employees, to fund advertising. So, he started stealing. First, it was small. Credit card fraud, overcharging customers, then refunding them if they complained. Enough to keep things running. Then, it escalated. He stole from relatives. He staged burglaries at his own business to collect insurance money. He wrote bad checks. He was 16 years old, running a real business, committing multiple felonies simultaneously, and somehow keeping it all going. But small crimes couldn't fund the vision Barry had for himself. He needed a bigger story, something that would make investors and banks open their checkbooks without asking too many questions. So, he invented one.
The genius, and it was a kind of genius, of what Barry Minkow built next was its simplicity. He invented a second division of ZZ Best called the Insurance Restoration Division. The idea? After fires, floods, and other disasters, insurance companies need someone to restore the damaged buildings. Big contracts. Millions of dollars per job. Exactly the kind of revenue that makes investors excited. The only problem, ZZ Best had no insurance restoration contracts, not a single one. So Barry created them. He forged documents. He created fake client companies that existed only on paper. He built an elaborate network of shell companies and intermediaries that made the revenue look real. He created over 20,000 fraudulent documents, invoices, contracts, progress reports, all fabricated from scratch. When auditors from major accounting firms came to verify the business, Barry was ready for them. He became friends with the auditors. He took them to dinners. He asked for their business advice, so they felt like consultants rather than investigators. And when they wanted to physically inspect a job site, a building ZZZ Best was supposedly restoring, Barry would rent an empty building, hire workers to appear busy, and walk the auditors through a completely staged construction scene. One auditor visited a supposed $8 million restoration job in Sacramento. It was a building Barry had rented for the day.
Workers were moving things around. Equipment was staged. It looked exactly like a major restoration in progress. The auditor signed off on everything. This pattern repeated across multiple job sites, multiple auditors, multiple accounting firms. Ernst & Winnie, one of the most prestigious auditing firms in the country, reviewed ZZZ Best's books and found nothing wrong. The numbers looked real because Barry had made them look real with 20,000 fake documents and staged buildings and dinner conversations that made accountants feel like friends. By 1986, ZZZ Best was ready to go public. In December of that year, Barry Minkow took his company to the stock market. He was 20 years old, the youngest person in American history at the time to take a company public. The stock exploded. Within months, ZZZ Best hit a market capitalization of nearly $300 million. Barry's personal stake was worth over $100 million on paper. He was everywhere. Magazine profiles, television interviews, the Oprah Winfrey Show. Banks were fighting for the chance to lend him money. He used the capital to lease and renovate a lavish office building in San Diego, spending over $4 million to make the headquarters look like a real company. Then, he went even further. He announced a takeover bid for KeyServe, one of ZZZ Best's biggest competitors. A $40 million acquisition that would make ZZZ Best the largest carpet cleaning company in America, the General Motors of carpet cleaning, as Barry called it. The deal was days away from closing, and that's when a Los Angeles homemaker named Stephanie Sharp changed everything. Stephanie Sharp had used ZZZZ Best's carpet cleaning service, the real part of the business, the part that actually existed, and ZZZ Best had overcharged her credit card. When she complained, the refund didn't come easily. So she did something Barry Minkow never anticipated. She told a reporter. A journalist at the Los Angeles Times started asking questions. Not big questions at first, just questions about the credit card fraud allegations and why Minkow hadn't repaid certain victims. The story ran in May 1987, on the eve of the KeyServe acquisition. Banks read the article and started pulling credit lines immediately. The investment bankers overseeing the KeyServe deal forced an indefinite postponement. Then, investigators started looking more closely at the restoration contracts. And they started finding things that didn't make sense. Building addresses that didn't match. Companies that didn't exist. Job sites that turned out to be empty warehouses. The day after the LA Times article ran, ZZZZ Best stock dropped 28% in a single session. Barry stepped down as CEO in July 1987. By August, the company filed for bankruptcy. Its assets, the equipment, the vehicles, the office furniture, were liquidated at auction. The total sale price for everything ZZZZ Best owned? $64,000. A company that had been worth $300 million sold everything it had for less than the cost of a new car. Investors lost over $100 million. Employees lost their jobs. Banks lost millions in loans they would never recover. And in January 1988, a federal grand jury indicted Barry Minkow and several associates on charges including racketeering, securities fraud, money laundering, credit card fraud, mail fraud, tax evasion, and bank fraud. At trial, he was convicted on 57 counts. He was sentenced to 25 years in federal prison. Barry Minkow was 22 years old. Here's where the story gets stranger. Barry Minkow was a model prisoner. He cooperated fully with federal investigators, helping them uncover other corporate frauds. His sentence was reduced. He was released after serving 8 years, out of prison at age 30. And then something genuinely unexpected happened. Barry Minkow became a pastor. He joined a church in San Diego, became deeply involved, eventually became a minister. He wrote books about his crimes, spoke at business schools and conferences, trained fraud investigators, and even consulted for the FBI. He became America's most famous, reformed con man. The redemption story was everywhere. For nearly a decade, it appeared to be real. Then, it wasn't. In 2011, Barry Minkow was charged with embezzling $3 million from the very church congregation he had been leading. He had been stealing from his own parishioners, people who had trusted him with their money and their faith for years. He pleaded guilty. He was sentenced to 5 years in prison. He was out again in 2014. Then, in 2022, he was convicted again, this time for manipulating the stock price of home builder Lennar, the same kind of securities fraud that had landed him in prison the first time 35 years earlier. He was sentenced to another 5 years. Barry Minkow has now been convicted of major financial crimes 3 separate times. He has spent a combined 18+ years in federal prison. And by most accounts, he is still not done. So what actually explains Barry Minkow? Psychologists who have studied his case point to something beyond ordinary greed. The pattern, the charm, the elaborate deception, the inability to stop even after consequences, the ability to convince sophisticated professionals of things that weren't true, suggests something more fundamental. Barry Minkow didn't just want money. He wanted to be believed. He wanted to be seen as the person he was pretending to be. The genius, the wunderkind, the reformed criminal, the man of God. And the terrifying thing is how good he was at it. He fooled auditors from the most prestigious accounting firms in the country. He fooled Wall Street banks. He fooled the investors who made him rich on paper. He fooled the FBI agents who used him as a consultant. He fooled a congregation that trusted him with their spiritual lives. He was eventually caught every single time, but not before causing damage that took years to untangle. The ZZZZ Best case directly changed American securities law. Congress passed new regulations in the wake of the fraud, requiring more rigorous auditing standards for public companies. The accounting industry rewrote its guidelines for how to verify client claims. Business schools added it as a case study in how oversight can fail when the person being audited is charismatic enough to make professionals feel like friends. One kid from the San Fernando Valley, who started by stealing from his parents' carpet-cleaning customers at age 16, changed how Wall Street regulates itself. And he's still, as of this writing, a free man. Subscribe. New financial crime story every week.